Okay, everybody, it's time to start. Let's make our way to our seats. Did you add another row? You did add another row. Okay. Is this the normal amount of seats that we usually have? No, still less. Okay. Let the last few stragglers file in. So a couple of things. One, today at 2 p.m., we will have the memorial for Doug Harmon at the building. There will be a meal for the family. This is not for everybody. There's a meal for the family at the building after worship. If you're involved in that, I guess talk to, well, Ann's probably back there right now. So talk to Ann. And yeah, so that's going to be what happens. We'll still have evening service as normal at 5, so it's not going to interfere at all with evening service, but we will do that. It will be streamed. The service for Doug Harmon will be streamed. Same place at 2 p.m. It'll probably start about 1:30. We'll loop the slideshow, like we do. So that is the plan for the memorial. I think that's the only thing I needed to say before class. I did print out some more class material. If you need class material, there should be some. Either Pat has some, or I saw there was a couple in the front, so you can get the class material for this class. Who remembers where we are? Page 33. Bob, you seem very definitive about that. How do you feel about teaching here, Bob? It's very strange. It is very strange. But we're sort of figuring it out as we go. I do feel bad for I was in the media room on Wednesday. I feel bad for those of you who are watching. I know some people are watching. Because they have no idea what people are saying. You guys out here saying stuff, they don't have a clue. So it's just like weird silence while the person stands up here for however long you guys are talking. I did think about maybe trying to get the handheld mic and throwing it at people so they could talk into the mic, but it's too much work. So at page 33 is correct. We are on chapter 9 of Acts. Of course, this is lesson 9 in the notebook. I think this is one of the few times this is going to be the case because we're going to get off again. I say that as I look through. It's pretty reasonable. Yeah, it is. So Acts chapter 9. Well, I say Acts chapter 9. So here's what this is. If you have this online, if you're watching online, you can go to the church website to the media section and download the class material, because this section, page 33 through 35, is something that I put together. I've sort of tweaked it over the years. I put it together a while ago. And you can see the things that I've blended. These are the texts. Acts 8, 1 through 3, 9, 1 through 22, Acts 22, 3 through 16, Acts 26, 4 through 10, and Galatians 1, 11 through 16. Those are the texts in this section. And you'll see I've got footnotes down there. So the little one indicating, and it comes after, right? So the stuff before the footnote is from that section. And you can see it that I've just sort of blended this together. Now, two of those sections, the Acts 22 and three of those sections. Acts 22, Acts 26, Galatians 1, those are first person. Paul is talking about himself, right? He's recounting something that happened to him. And so it uses the I, right? I did this, I did this. Acts 8 and 9, of course, are third person, where it is somebody narrating, in this case Luke, right? Luke's narrating what happened. So to make it all fit, I've made everything first person. So if you look at these texts, so let's look at the little small 8 is the first time where there's, the first little 8. So second sentence of the second paragraph, then I, breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters. Well, that's from Acts chapter 9, and if you go to Acts chapter 9, it's not first person, right? It's then he did this and he did that. But I've changed it to make the whole thing one tense. So it is as if Paul is recounting this story. And so in that case, so in some cases you can look at the text in the Bible, and I've changed it from third person to first person to just make the whole thing flow better. This is a sort of total summary of Paul's conversion, or Saul's conversion. I guess he's still Saul at this point. So Saul's conversion. So let's read this. We'll talk about it as we go through, and you can see, of course, where I'm drawing these from as you follow at the bottom. You can see where the texts are from. So let's read this together, then we'll talk about it. So we're not going to be in Acts chapter. We are sort of in Acts chapter 9, but really all over the place. So I am a Jew. I'm going to start in the first paragraph there, right? I am a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in Jerusalem. This is as if Paul was speaking, right? Educated at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, as all of you are this day. My manner of life from my youth, spent from the beginning among my own nation and in Jerusalem, is known by all the Jews. They have known for a long time, if they are willing to testify, that according to the strictest part of our religion, I have lived as a Pharisee. Okay, what are we seeing about Paul here? What kind of person is he at the beginning? Devout and educated. He's well known. What else do we see this early? Yep, he is training as a Pharisee. The question is, did he actually become a Pharisee? Was he training as a Pharisee? It's a little bit unclear, but he is definitely going on that track, right, in Jewish society towards being a Pharisee, if he's not one already. What else? Very zealous. A couple of key ideas that we haven't brought out yet about Paul. Where is he born? Where is that? If you don't know where that is, you can go to page 36. I have a map. I always have a map. Page 36, you can see where Tarsus is. Notably, Tarsus is not where? It is not in Israel. So he's a Jew born in Tarsus, Cilicia. However, he was not born in sort of the seat of Jewish power or religion. He was born far away, and really born in a city that was predominantly what race predominantly? Yeah, Gentile. I say race predominantly. There's probably a mix of races in Tarsus, but Gentile, predominantly Gentile. Second thing is, who did he train under? Gamaliel. And what do we know about Gamaliel at this point in the narrative? He's a teacher of the Jews. Carl? Yes, Gamaliel took an approach very opposite to Paul, or to Saul rather. I'm going to keep saying those interchangeably. At this point, he's still Saul. Gamaliel's approach to the Christian idea was very hands-off, right? Hey, don't. If it's from God, we're not going to do anything. If it's not from God, then it will fail, right? Gamaliel was very hands-off. Paul is the opposite, right? He is taking a hands-on approach, which we'll see as we read through this. So, educated under Gamaliel, did not really follow Gamaliel's persona in this sense. I think Gamaliel is a reasonable sort of person, seems to be devout, seems to be religious, or not religious. Huh? I think so. Does anybody remember offhand, was he part of the Sanhedrin? Is that what it said? Yeah, I don't think it explicitly said one way or the other. Where was that? Here we are. Yeah, he's in the council. Yeah, Pharisee in the council. Yeah. So he is part of the Sanhedrin. So, yeah, and it makes sense, right? He's totally convinced that he's right. I keep having to forget, I have to repeat these things. He's totally convinced that he's right, which makes sense given his upbringing, right? From my youth, spent in the beginning of my own nation and in Jerusalem. His own nation would be who? maybe the people in Tarsus, but he's with the synagogue in Tarsus, right, with the Jews in Tarsus. And then in Jerusalem, when he goes to Jerusalem, they have known for a long time, if they're willing to testify, that according to the strictest part, or party, does it say party? Yeah, strictest party. So not just sort of loosey-goosey, this is some good stuff we could do, but the most strict part of their religion, right, the Pharisees. I lived as a Pharisee. Let's read the next section. This will be like 6 lines down. There's no good way to say this, right after the little 2. And I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people. So extremely zealous was I for the tradition of my fathers. You have heard of my former life in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God violently and tried to destroy it. I was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And I did so in Jerusalem. I not only locked up some of the saints, or many of the saints rather, in prison, after receiving authority from the chief priests. But when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them, and I punished them often in all the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. What does that mean? Tried to make them blaspheme. What is he doing there? Okay? So how is he trying to make them do that? What does that mean? How would he do that? He's in the synagogues. He's trying to make them blaspheme. Carl? Yeah. Remember, why was Jesus killed? Ultimately. Yeah, he was accused of blasphemy. And what part of his teaching was blasphemy? The claim to be God. That was the blasphemy, right? The teaching about him claiming to be divine. That was the blasphemy. Now, ultimately, he was killed, really, in as far as legal terms, he was killed because he was accused of sedition and trying to create an uprising, which was untrue. But as far as the Jews were concerned, the reason he needed to die was blasphemy. Okay, so we come to the Christians, a few years later probably. Not very many years later. When was this? Let me look at this. Yeah, probably even just maybe even a year or less later. And he is trying to get them essentially to probably admit that very thing, that Jesus is God. That's the blasphemy. There's a lot of other teachings, of course, throughout the Mediterranean world at the time. The Jews weren't really concerned about that necessarily. But the teaching that Jesus is God, that's the blasphemy. The thing that he's trying to get them to admit to, which it shouldn't have been very hard. Why? I mean, that's like the central thing, right? That's the central point of their Christianity. So it shouldn't have been very hard for them to do. What else do we see here? There's another thing I wanted to say. He's very zealous. What does it mean to advance in Judaism? How would you advance in Judaism? Okay, so maybe in notoriety or who you're serving under. Okay, maybe he's trying to work his way up to being in the council. The hierarchy, of course, in the Jewish world, there's like 4 things I want to say all at once. The general way that things worked is the discipling method, right? So you had a teacher and he had disciples, and then the more disciples he had, the more sort of prestige he had, the more followers of him. And so there were particular interpretations of the traditions of the elders or the old law. Of course, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those are following 2 different sort of interpretations. There were others, of course. So the way that you would advance in Judaism is you'd get to study under somebody who had a lot of prestige, like Gamaliel, or you would start to acquire your own disciples who would follow your particular interpretation or teaching, and eventually working your way up ultimately to being one of either the chief priests, which he couldn't be, or one of the sort of religious leaders of Israel. And again, it's hard to tell because he doesn't get into a lot of detail where he eventually ended up in that hierarchy, but you get the sense that he's definitely a rising star as far as religious leaders in Jerusalem go. People know who he is. And when we say he's advancing, that must mean that he knows, either he's memorized large sections of it, or he knows a lot of the different teaching, or he has a particularly good way of explaining them, or he's really good at teaching them, or he has a really good way of different ways that, of course, you think about religious teachings. It's all about your followers and how you teach. And so he is a rising star in that. Now, he sort of abandons that track of teaching and having disciples, and instead decides to do what? Yeah, persecute the church, right? So he abandons that sort of track that he's on and goes and he's either in the synagogues trying to trick them into saying something blasphemous, which again wouldn't be very hard, or he's in literally grabbing them, taking them, and putting them in prison. I think is what he says he does there, right? Yeah, not only I locked up many of the saints in prison. So he's abandoned that sort of discipleship work and is now in the business of, he's like almost really, can't think of the word now, just left me. He's trying to be a cop for Judaism is what he's doing, right? Taking them to prison, casting his vote against them. At the end there, I persecuted this way. I wanted to read one. I punished them often in the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. And in raging fury against them, I persecuted them even to foreign cities. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as the high priest and the whole council of elders can bear me witness. Okay. One main theme we see out of this. How many times does he say something to the effect that a lot of people know what I was doing? Right? He says, known by all the Jews, they have known from a long time if they're willing to testify, right? As the high priest and the whole council of elders can bear me witness. So his main point in this, as we're piecing this together from various things that are written, not only was he very zealous, not only was he either maybe apparently intelligent or well-learned rather. Either he had a lot of learning, or he was very intelligent and he had a good way of speaking and teaching, or he was very hardworking, or he was very, again, dedicated, devout. Not only that, but he was somewhat of a public figure, right? He is known by a lot of people. And I don't know if there's an analog. I can't really think of an analog, really. Can anybody think of a modern day analog to this sort of circumstance? Maybe a well-known political figure who starts out in local government and then, of course, works his way up to higher and higher levels of government. And, of course, he's young and people really like him, and he's sort of a rising star in politics. That's really all I can think of as a comparison here, because we don't really have the same analog. Don? Yeah, a special prosecutor. That's what he is, a special prosecutor in this case against the Christians. And again, well known especially probably among the higher-ups as one who keeps arresting these Christians, who they all hate, apparently. Now, it's hard to know in the general populace how he would have been perceived. Well, even in the general populace, we know among Christians, how do they think about Saul? They're terrified of him, right? Because apparently people know about him, and this is the point. He's not some backwater dude that nobody knows about. This is a well-known, semi-public figure that people know who he is. First, because he was very sort of a rising star in Judaism, and then because of his work persecuting the Christians. He's well-known. Bob? Oh, I definitely think he made Gamaliel uncomfortable. Yeah, it's hard to know. So what he said, is it possible that his zealousness, that's not the right word. What's the word? Zeal. Oh, that's the word. Zeal. Is it possible that his zeal made the Sanhedrin uncomfortable with the way that he's persecuting the Christians? It's hard to know. The Sanhedrin is not I can't think of the right word. Not a unified block, right? We know that there's dissenting opinion in the Sanhedrin. Some people think they should do one thing, some people think they should do another. I do think it's very interesting. In fact, one of the more interesting things about this story to me, he mentions he's trained at the feet of Gamaliel, and he takes the exact opposite approach that Gamaliel takes in regards to Christianity. Gamaliel is very much of the opinion, let's let it play out, we'll see what happens. I don't want to be found opposing God, so we'll just sort of see what goes on. And Paul is very much the opposite, right? We're not just going to sit back and let this go on. We're going to do something about it, and we're going to do it now. And it's just that contrast is very interesting between them. So, I don't know, maybe you think about the higher-ups definitely did not like the Christians. The chief priests gave them authority to do this. But maybe as part of the council or the Pharisees or the Sadducees, maybe some of them were having second thoughts. Maybe some of them, do we really need to go this far? I don't know. It's hard to know. Carl? Oh, okay. So let's read the next section there. Oh. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point. So he says at the beginning, second line, educated according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God as all you are to this day. Okay, he does this, I think, when he says he's trying to make them blaspheme, because he thinks they're blasphemers. So when he says he's trying to make them blaspheme, it's not like he's trying to trick them into doing something they don't want to do. He's really trying to get them to admit their crimes, is what he's trying to do, right? He believes, I think fully, that this is what God wants, right? God deserves to be worshipped the right way, the way that he wants. God deserves to be worshipped according to the law of the fathers, the traditions of the elders. These upstart Christians are polluting the worship. They're polluting the teaching of God. They're blasphemers. They're speaking against God. And so he is doing this, I do think, from a place of misguided, can't think of the word now, misguided, good intentions, right? Even though, of course, he is going so far overboard. And again, this is not something necessarily, this sort of inquisition, I'm not sure I say that, they've done this in the past. Israel did do this. We just got done talking about Ezra and Nehemiah, it wasn't as violent as this. But the business with the foreign wives in Ezra and Nehemiah, very similar idea, right? Is they're all getting down there's this problem in Israel, and they're getting down to business of correcting this major problem. I think that a lot of people in Israel thought Christianity was like that. It's this corrupt group that is rising and threatening to destabilize Judaism as a whole, and it's got to be clamped down. So it's not like they're just sort of way out in left field on this, even though, of course, they are incorrect. The next section here, as we switch into, when I say that, we're sort of all over the place in the verses. I was there when they cast Stephen out of the city and stoned him, and the witnesses laid down their garments at my feet. Then I, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters to the synagogue at Damascus, so that if I found any belonging to the way, men or women, I might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Okay, this is twice here. In verse 6, Acts 22, and then in verse 8, or not verse 8, in the section, or the footnote 8. So in Acts 9 and in Acts 22, he uses the term the way. What does that mean, that term? The way of Christ, the new teaching. Carl? Yeah. Now, he's using this term. Again, it's hard to know because of the way I blended this together. If you look at the original sections of the text. These are, I say that, one's in Acts chapter 9 before he's converted. One is in Acts chapter 22 where he's recounting his conversion. I should have looked this up. I didn't look it up ahead of time. Can anybody think of anybody else in the New Testament who uses the term way, other than Jesus, right? Do any of the other apostles or writers use the term way? I kind of think Paul's the only one. I could look it up. Although way is such a generic word, I'm going to get all sorts of non-useful search results. Yeah, other than Jesus is the question. Of course, Jesus does. Oh, yeah, see, I'm getting all sorts of going down by the way and this way and that way. That was useless. Yeah, that's a useless search. I have to do it later. The term way is an interesting term. Of course, referring to what Ron's referencing, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I think that is the intentional sort of reference in that term, the way. But this idea of this new way of following God, I think is, again, another sort of interesting way that this is being used. I kind of like the term the way. I kind of wish we used it more. Personally, I just like the way it's hard to use way because it's such a generic word. I like the way the term refers to a fundamental idea in Christianity, right? The followers of the way, not only the way of following God, the path of following God, but Jesus himself, the way, the truth, and the life, going to the Father, right? It describes Christianity as this journey to the Father. I like that idea. That's sort of a sidebar. Anyway, so what is he doing? If you go to page 36, you can see where Damascus is. So Jerusalem's down in Palestine. Damascus is sort of between Jerusalem and Antioch. This is on page 36. You can see that map is so low resolution. I got to fix that map. Anyway, you can see sort of where he's going there. We'll talk about that map more in a minute. Back here. Let's see, where did we leave off? From them I received, from the chief priests, right? I received letters to the brothers. Who's the brothers? I received letters to the brothers. Yeah, the Jewish leaders in Damascus. He's going to show up in Damascus and be like, hey, I have these letters from the chief priests, and I'm here to basically start your inquisition in Damascus, essentially is what he's doing there, right? I journeyed toward Damascus to take those who were there and bring them in bonds to Jerusalem to be punished. It's interesting in the story, of course, if you know what happens next, Ananias is one of the people that he's going to find. Right? Now, we know Ananias is in Damascus. He's going to go be there and see Ananias. But Ananias is not incorrect to have his reaction. Because Paul's literally going to Damascus to get people like Ananias and take them back to Jerusalem in chains. Right? So Ananias sort of is aware of the situation here, right? Which we haven't read that yet. Now, as I went on my way, I drew near to Damascus, and about noon, suddenly a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shone around me and those who journeyed with me. It's important, he says, about noon. Why is that important? Yeah, it's already daytime. The sun's in full view. Brighter than the sun. So we have this noonday sun in the sky. And this other light, whatever it is way more powerful than that light, shone around me and those who journeyed with me. When we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goats. Now again, as with so many Bible stories, I do wonder about the inflection of Jesus here. Angry, curious, weary, declarative. Like, I don't know. I do wonder how Jesus sounded here. The men who were traveling with me stood speechless, for they saw the light and heard the voice, but did not see anyone or understand the voice they heard. And this is a conglomeration. One of the reasons I like this conglomeration is the different accounts, Acts 9, 22, 26, they give different details of the event. It's very much like trying to weave all the Gospels together, just on a much smaller scale. So we get the full picture here, right? So he sees the light, everybody falls down. Then this voice speaks to him in the Hebrew language. Nobody understands the voice, although presumably they all understand Hebrew, right? Who's with him? I heard some mumbling. Yeah, probably other Jews from Jerusalem who are going up there to Damascus with him. So it's not like they don't understand Hebrew. So what's going on here? Well, it's clearly supernatural, right? Clearly some finagling of understanding supernaturally. They see the light, they hear the voice. It probably just sounds like Charlie Brown, that wah, 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 wah. And then if he's speaking in Hebrew and they don't understand it, that's kind of how it has to be. They did not see anyone or understand what they heard. So everybody falls down. Why would they fall down?
That's almost a universal reaction when somebody encounters God in person.
Yes, it is. And we see this throughout the Bible narrative. When people encounter God in this sort of way, there's a couple of exceptions. But the first instinct is to go to the ground. Now, if you're going down the road, you don't see a person, you just see a bright light. Of course, for them, I don't know if they don't have the same sort of thing. In today's situation, you might think there's a bomb going off, right? Or some sort of explosive happening. Of course, they wouldn't have necessarily thought that, but it's a natural instinct, I think, to protect yourself, right? Protect yourself from this horrible thing that's about to happen to me. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Oh, dear. Right? And so they all fall down. They don't understand what's going on. I said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the Lord said, it's interesting, it doesn't tell us. Did they understand his responses, or are they like hearing one side of a phone call here? I don't know, the other people that are around him. I said, "Who are you, Lord?" The Lord said, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. Rise and stand on your feet, for I have prepared for you for this for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and witness of the things in which you have seen me." And I've got to start that whole sentence over. That was just a terrible reading. "But rise and stand on your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and witness to the things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you." So witnessing not just what he's already seen, but what he will see, right? Delivering you from your people and from from your people. It's interesting there, right? Delivering you from your people. It's an interesting turn of phrase. "And from the Gentiles, to whom I am sending you to open their eyes, that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me." A lot of stuff going on there. What's the point? What's the gist? What does Jesus want? Why is Jesus appearing to Saul? Yeah, "Go represent me to specifically to the Gentiles." He says that several times, right? You're going to go tell them about me. The things that you've seen and the things that you will see. It's interesting what he says there, right? The things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you. So you've seen me now. You're going to go tell people, but there's going to be some more stuff later on down the road you're also going to tell people about. Again, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. It's interesting, twice he says, at the beginning, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And then he says, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." He's not sort of dancing around the point here. Jesus is very clear about this. You're persecuting the Christians, you're persecuting me, right? My will. I said, "What shall I do, Lord?" And again, I do wonder, is this, I kind of think fearful maybe. Again, this bright light, this person's appeared, this person that he's been persecuting. So maybe fearful, what do I do? Or maybe it was more, I don't know, depends on Paul's personality, I guess. Maybe it's more just sort of, okay, well, what do you want me to do? The Lord said to me, "Rise, go into Damascus, and there you'll be told all that is appointed for you to do." Why doesn't Jesus just tell him now? Okay, needs to get the rest of the story. Why doesn't Jesus just tell him now what he's going to do? Why does he say, "Go to Damascus, and then you will be told"? Why not just tell him here? Yeah, I think it's very clear, as you go through this story and others, God wants people to be involved, right? He wants people. He sends Philip to go to the eunuch. He could have just sent an angel to the eunuch. He sends Philip to the eunuch. And I'll come back to you, Carl. here I think it's very apparent and obvious through the story. He wants Ananias to be involved in what goes on with Saul, not just because I think it's important that people are involved, but what Larry said is so that there's somebody, some Christian, who can vouch for what's going on, right? A person who can tell the other Christians, hey, this is what's happened. Carl? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very consistent thing that God involves his people in the teaching, right? That's very consistent. Did you have your hand? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the idea of him appearing, of course, for those who didn't hear what he said, one of the things about the apostleship, the office of the apostle, of course, was witness to the resurrection, right? Now, it's probable, if Paul is training in the or training to be a member of the Sanhedrin, it is probable that Paul was around Jerusalem when what was happening? When all of not just the crucifixion, but when Jesus was teaching. Now, I don't know, he doesn't say this exactly. It is very likely to me that Jesus, at least, not Jesus, that Saul either saw Jesus or was very familiar with Jesus while he was on earth. And then, of course, now he's witnessing the resurrection. I don't know if he was at the crucifixion, it doesn't say either way, but I suspect that he would have either been at the crucifixion or at least very aware of what was going on. Because again, they use the same tactic. That the idea of what Saul is doing here, trying to get them to blaspheme, that's essentially what they were getting Jesus for, was blasphemy. It's all the same stuff. Did I see a hand over here? No. Okay, where did I leave off here? I guess we'll start at the third paragraph, page 34. I said, "What shall I do, Lord?" The Lord said to me, "Rise, go into Damascus. There you will be told all that is appointed for you to do." Therefore I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision. Probably a good idea. I rose from the ground, and although my eyes were opened, I saw nothing. So they led me by the hand and brought me into Damascus, and for 3 days I was without sight and neither ate nor drank. Now, you're the other people around Saul, I keep doing that. You're the other people that are traveling with Saul. Here's your experience. You're traveling along, there's a bright light, we all fall down, you hear this wah, 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 you don't know what's going on. You probably do hear Saul say the things that he said, right? This sort of one-sided, it's like listening into one side of a phone conversation. So they probably did hear Saul say the stuff, and then the light goes away and Saul can't see. What are you to make of that? If you're the people around Saul that are traveling with him. So here's what you've heard. You've seen the light, you fell down. You heard Saul say two things. "Who are you, Lord? What shall I do, Lord?" That's what you've heard. And now he's blind. If you're just one of those random travelers, what do you think you make of that? Carl? Yeah. It's hard to know because he doesn't say how much he told them or not about this event. But I do suspect that probably some of the people that were traveling with him were also converted. I don't know that for a fact. but I suspect that that's probably the case. For 3 days I was without sight, and I neither ate nor drank. He's really running up on the edge of death here, really. Now there was a disciple at Damascus, sort of a sidebar here. There was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, and he said, "Here I am, Lord." And the Lord said to him, "Rise and go to the street called Straight, at a house of Judas. Look for a man." Here we go again. Why not just send him to Judas's house? Or to Ananias' house? Why Judas's house? I don't know. We're involving more people here. At the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul. For behold, he is praying. He has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. Now, it doesn't say it in the text, but we can infer here. So they lead him to the house of Judas. He's sitting there praying, and God obviously beams into his head a vision. There's this guy that's going to come, right? Ananias answered, "Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints at Jerusalem." Here again, Paul is clearly well known. "And here he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who call on your name." How did he know that he had authority from the chief priests? How did Ananias know that? Apparently they'd spread the word. Now, either somebody heard about it in Jerusalem and then told the Christians in Damascus, or there's really two possibilities. Either the Christians heard about it sort of covertly and spread the news around, hey, look out for this guy. Or the Jews in Damascus just made a declaration. Saul's coming, he has authority to arrest you, watch out. Like, those are kind of the only two options here. Was that a bell? Did I hear a bell ring? Man, we are not going to get done. Where'd I leave off? Oh, here we are. "And he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call on your name." Oh, yeah. So, why is Ananias questioning this? First of all, who's Ananias questioning? He's questioning God, which means he probably feels very strongly about this, right? What is he questioning exactly? Why is he voicing an objection? Yeah, he kind of thinks God's sending him to his death. Isn't that that's sort of what's happening here, right? Are you sure about this, God? I mean, you know who this is, right? That's kind of the sense I get from this. Ananias thinks that this is life-threatening. And it's so life-threatening to him that he's willing to voice an objection literally to Jesus appearing to him. Or no, is it just a voice? Oh no, a vision. He had a vision, right? So literally Jesus appearing to him, he's willing to sort of, are we sure about this? Right? That's how serious Ananias thinks this is. But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and children of Israel." It's interesting. Gentiles are mentioned more, and Gentiles are mentioned first. But it's not like he was never supposed to go talk to the Jews, right? He does say that here. Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. "For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." Ooh, that last sentence there. "For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." A little bit of poetic justice. Why? How much suffering did he cause to the Christians for the sake of, now, different flavor of that, but it was for the sake of his name, for the sake of Jesus. He didn't like Jesus. They're claiming to be Christians, so he makes them suffer. Then we have this reversal, right? And so it's ironic. Not ironic. I don't know if it's ironic. Poetic. Where now he is suffering for the same name, but as a willing participant, right? Sort of an interesting sort of reversal there. Any other thoughts? We're going to end there. We're going to end in our story as Saul is at the house and Ananias is about to go talk to him. Any other comments or thoughts before we wrap it up? It's a good place to end our story. Yeah. Yeah, Saul is in for a rough couple decades. right? Now, obviously, he's going to think it's worth it, and he says this later on. And you may think to yourself, why are we digging so much into this? Okay, the story appears 3 times, which already in itself is unusual. So it appears in Acts 9, Acts 22, Acts 26. Obviously, this story is central to not just the second half of Acts, which it is, but it is also central to most of the rest of the New Testament. Because who writes most of it? He does, right? So this is going to be relevant, and you may think, why are we digging so much into this? We're digging more into this than we have other stories in Acts. Again, as we go through the rest of Acts, one of the things we're going to do in this study is connect the epistles, right? The epistles and how they fit into the different churches and where and why and how. Saul is really central for a lot of that. And his conversion story is referenced in a bunch of different epistles, right? He talks about his previous life in a bunch of different ways. So ultimately, we'll talk about next week. We didn't get finished with it. But the why there's so much detail in this one conversion that there's just not in many others. There's not many other conversion stories that have this much detail. And I think there is a reason for that we'll get to next week. So we'll pick this up in the rest of the story next week. Was that the second bell? I believe that was the second bell. So, yeah.